I'm trying to turn bare pasture into a lush food forest. In 2019, after finishing my PDC with Jeff Lawton online, I got started, but I did have some problems. Today I'm going to show you what I'm doing to fix those issues, build soil and create a really abundant food growing system. I'm Linda and this is Huttons Valley Permaculture. I'm going to just show you each of my trees and how they're going and how I'm trying to convert all this area from growing grass into more of a forest floor. When I started the swales, I put down lots of cover crop, but that failed because it was eaten up by wild ducks. Now, your productive trees and shrubs really don't grow well in soils dominated by grasses. They're more a bacterial soil. The soils that trees and shrubs like is fungal dominated because they provide the food that the trees need as part of the nutrient cycling. Basically, I'm just behind the 8 ball and I've got a bit more work to do because the cover crop failed. At the start of my roadside swale is a little almond tree. Now, I've already pruned them. I find in autumn I do my pruning and I do my chop and drop mulching, which is what's helping to promote the soil change. Woody mulch such as this does break down and it's broken down by fungus, so that helps to change the soil. I have gathered up lots of animal manure from my pastures before putting on the woody mulch. In my swales, I've got lots of support species. They have lots of different roles. This one is an acacia. Bees love all the flowers and I'm using it for chopping and dropping. So that's what I've got down here for this little tree. I've got various species of the support trees. Acacias come in all sorts, but the bees love them all. They are very fast growing and they're nitrogen fixers. So when you do chop the trees and use the mulch, they're also releasing nitrogen into the soil, which if you plant them close to your young productive trees, it will release that extra fertility towards them. This is another almond tree and I've done the same here. I've got lots of woody mulch around it, but I've also added in the layer of manure. In this section here, I've still got to do quite a lot of planting. Planting heavily is one of my strategies, and with autumn here now and a bit more rain about, I'm going to start to really thickly plant out these grassy areas. By planting thickly, the trees as they grow starts to create quite a bit of shade, and of course grasses don't grow so well in the shade, so that helps to just get them under control. This is my quince tree. It's struggled this year because I do have a problem with bush rats burrowing in right into the root system, and this was sort of flat to the ground just about with half its roots being eaten, but I'm trying to bring it back to life and so far so good. I'm hoping next season it will do a lot better. These beautiful robinias have got such a lovely colour and really bring some contrast to the foliage in my food forests. The robinias are a great support species because they are nitrogen fixing as well, so when you prune them they also release that to the soil, but they do produce the biomass that you need for mulching the different areas. Moving through here, this is one of my younger Tagersasti trees. These are a really great tree, again for bees and for producing the biomass that you need to mulch your higher value trees. I'm just going to let this tree grow a little bit larger before I use it in my chop and drop. These two trees here are two of my fig trees. I have put some manure around the base and I've really only just got started with chop and drop at this stage. I'm going to really thickly put all the branches down around the tree. As they get bigger, I hope to be able to extend out further and further and just promote the change of the soil. I have started to add a few smaller food plants in these areas, although it is a little bit challenging. I do have creeping buttercup in lots of areas, but I'm hoping with burying right around these little plants with the manure, not only does it add organic matter which helps retain moisture in dry conditions, but I'm hoping it'll start to suppress all these weeds that are growing in this area, and of course all the grasses. Once I finish mulching all around my larger trees, I'm going to give a little bit more attention to these additional food plants that I've got growing. Put a little bit of mulch around those as well. Just needs a finer touch so that I'm not burying them all. With lots of support trees around the swale, I can just chop these down, and in the case of my little rhubarb plants, I'm going to chop them up fairly finely and just put that around, and then that will still be in place by the time summer comes around, and it will help to retain moisture and also protect the soil organisms and give them food so that they can in turn cycle nutrients and promote really healthy plants. Both this tree and the one up here, I did prune very heavily, but my timing was out because the frost came fairly quickly after. It was just starting to reshoot, and it was a very heavy frost, so it really impacted on these plants, and they just didn't regrow, and they've since died. This is the cherry tree that I've already pruned, and I've just chopped up the prunings and put them around the tree. I do have to add in a lot more prunings from my support trees, such as the Tagasasti that's right next to it here. With a few of these dead trees as reminders, I've changed my practice from a really severe chopping of the trees to more of a substantial pruning. So this tree here, I'm just going to take down sort of the top, maybe half or a third, just take that out at the top so that there's still a substantial amount of the tree left going into winter. It's late autumn now, and my little pomegranate is looking beautiful with its lovely yellow foliage. It was really cool this summer, and while we got some flowers, we certainly didn't get any fruit. I might have to wait and see if we get some decent hot summers to get some fruit out of this. This tree here is one of my 2 plum trees, and they both gave me an abundance of fruit this last summer. So I'm really looking after these guys. I've got the manure down, got some mulch on, but I will be taking some more. Behind them both here is a Tagasasti tree and an acacia. Now, something else that your support trees can do for you is to provide a bit of shelter for your trees. Now, going into winter when this is dormant, it won't need much in the way of shelter, but coming out of winter and going into spring, it can get quite cold here. So when pruning the trees around it, I'm going to start to keep in mind that these trees can help to protect from cold winds and particularly frosts when these start to blossom in spring. So that's the sort of thing when I'm taking the harvest of mulch that I'm going to start to think about. So you've just got to think of the benefits of the support trees and not take it all as mulch, because you might need it later in the season for a different purpose. Not far away from my swales, I've got my wood lot, and I do find I have an excess of wood. Some of it falls and rots, and I've started to actually move some of it into my food forest. I've just piled up this wood at the moment, but I will be spreading that around underneath my fruit and nut trees just to increase the amount of fungal food that's in the system. Across the other side of my dam, I have what I call my bottom swale. It's also the overflow for my dam. I've done a lot of work on this swale during this past year. Lots of trees that are coming up in my berm and my swale are these acacias. Now acacias are what they call pioneer species because they'll grow in really terrible soils, you know, just bare clays, and they start the system off because basically they're biomass producers and they start to put the organic matter onto the soil so that higher value trees can grow. You can see here on my cutout I've got some trees just here, but also further down I've got trees growing on the cutout, which I'm leaving in place because they're going to have some uses as well. As they mature, they're going to shade out the floor of the swale to help prevent evaporation when the rains come and the water drops. So we'll get more soakage into the soil. But also, as I rotate all of my animals through the system, I'm hoping that those trees will actually provide some shelter for those animals as well. The Tagesasti, and particularly this variety of acacia, I think it's a blackwood, really grow quickly and provide a heap of biomass. This one's a little apple tree. This particular area had quite a bit of clay when the dam was put in and the swales built. So this apple tree has been a bit slow getting going, but I've done the manure and I've done one application of my chop and drop, but I might sort of add a little bit more. These swales also create wonderful habitat for wildlife. I've got another apple tree here, which again I've put manure around and quite a lot of this woody mulch. Now I am careful to make sure that the manure isn't right up to the trunk of the tree, and I try and make sure when I lay down my mulch that it's also well away from the tree. And I do go around and double check. You never know what's got in there and pushed it around again. But that tree is looking pretty good. The work I've been doing in this swale, which I do have a video on and I'll leave a link to it, is just to do a whole lot more planting. So you can see here I've got the little acacia, I've got the young Tagesasti. I've thrown in some Jerusalem artichokes just to get something growing and add to diversity. So they will just grow. Moving through, this is another apple tree which I've done my chop and drop treatment with. But surrounding this little apple tree, I've got other varieties of acacia. I've got some little black currants, some more Jerusalem artichokes, currants. So far I've only just got around to some of these smaller shrubs with a little bit of manure, but we'll get back to them with the woody mulch. This tree here I've harvested from. You can see up there I've cut that. I've still got these taller branches that I can pick from, but I'm really mindful of leaving sufficient for this tree to be able to withstand the cold of some heavy frosts. I do have different acacias flowering at different times, so I'm trying to just take from the trees that aren't about to flower. Flowering is just fantastic for the bees, and I'm just trying to move around, chop down at the right time so that the bees don't miss out on the flowers. I've also included some higher value natives. This is a Banksia, which is just going to be beautiful for birds and wildlife. I won't be using it as a chop and drop. It's quite a slow growing native. That will be here to stay. This creeping buttercup has been knocked back by the dry conditions we've had over summer, but I anticipate that taking off. I'm hoping as these trees grow, it will get shaded out and its growth sort of slowed. That's my fourth apple tree there. This section here I have planted out, but I did have an escaping cow that set things back a bit. Took out some plants that I'd planted and had a nice munch on some others. So you've really got to keep your electric fences on, I've found, and keep those cows where you want them. This one looks like it's starting to grow again. This is one of my walnut trees. It's just started to take off this year. I have got this cage protecting it just in case animals stray out of their fence line, but I will need to move it because I need to get in here and get some manure around it. Around these trees I've started to add in some other little shrubs, again with the currants, because they're very easy to propagate, and I've put in some more little Tagersasti trees. Certainly one of my strategies is to just increase planting. Now that it's cooled down, I'll be able to add in lots more of these little trees. If I can just continue to heavily plant out these areas, shade the grass, I'll slowly start to take control over these grassy areas. I'm finding with such a large area of swale, I've got 240 metres of swales, that it's worth my effort just putting in a lot of time into particular areas to really try and get them under control and not beat myself up too much for the areas that are kind of a bit like this. I do think it's worthwhile paying a little bit more attention to areas where your trees are. This is another walnut tree, and around it I've planted several more Tagersastis and some more little currant plants that you can see. There's one there. So I've put those trees up close to my walnut tree rather than in this area, just to make sure that that benefits from the support of those little trees. This is one of the areas that I will be working at as time permits. Now, talking about areas that I'm just neglecting at the moment, it's neglect with a purpose. Now, this area here, I've had avocados in those little tented areas, but the frosts here have really wiped them out. So the purpose of leaving these trees as is to actually start to protect these areas a little bit more. When I get some new trees, I'll be planting them kind of in the middle of all of these trees. I've got southerly winds coming from this way, which hits this top swale, and over the back there beyond that hay shed I have westerly winds which really come over the top and impact this end of my swale as well. So I didn't take that into account when I first planted out these higher value trees, but I'm going to wait till these trees have made an impact not only on the grass growth and shading all of that out, but they will also start to impact on the wind that hits this area and provide more protection for any higher value trees that I want to put in. This is a little mulberry tree. It really hasn't grown much since I got it 2.5 years ago. I don't know if it's because of where I've got it in this swale, but slowly it'll start to get a bit more protection and hopefully it'll kick on. I don't mulch under these trees. If they're not a food producing tree or shrub, I haven't been mulching because I want the mulch under those productive trees. But you can see the grasses are really starting to get under control here, and slowly over time with that shade they'll really start to disappear. Through this section here, I will cut these dry grasses down. I have added a few smaller trees in, but not too many at this point. But now with the cooler, wetter weather, I might be able to fill up these areas a little bit more, and then I can use those dry grasses as mulches to support my new plantings. This avocado tree was doing really well until one of my escapee sheep decided to eat it all up. It is currently shooting from below the graft. I'm going to let that keep going and maybe see if I can graft something onto that rootstock, but get those roots going really well first, and hopefully by the time it's ready to graft it'll have a whole heap of protection from all these trees surrounding it. This here is one of my orange trees, and it has had protection since it was planted. So it's not going too badly. It's even got its first fruit coming on it. Hopefully we'll keep it protected through any frosts that come along. But I did have one of the trees that was providing shelter from the south winds that come from right there. It suffered when I did the pruning, and I really hadn't thought about the frost and the winds back then as much as I should have. So I'm going to keep this tree in mind and perhaps get some shade cloth or just establish a bit more of a windbreak behind this tree just to make sure that it's got plenty of protection. This lovely purple flower is some of the remaining cover crop that must have been hiding from the wood ducks. Right here is a lemon tree that succumbed to the cold frosty weather but has since started to reshoot from again below the graft. I'm going to leave it, see what sort of tree grows. If the fruit isn't satisfactory, I might actually try doing some grafting on this one as well. I've got 3 almond trees up here. They really suffered because of the dry season that we had this year, and I think my swale might be a little bit higher here than further down because it does collect water down further rather than up here. So I might have to do something about perhaps carving out a little bit more of a trench in my swale to sink some water. Or I might do some water harvesting trenches sort of around these 3 almond trees just to help them get the water that they need, because I don't want to be out here irrigating through summer. And that's my other little almond tree there. Each year I've had these trees, I have been getting around and mulching with a lot of the prunings. And you can see under here, there is a lot of woody matter that is slowly breaking down. What I did find in summer though, was in a lot of areas, there was a lot of this woody trimmings, but there was a lot of bare soil. So there wasn't enough of sort of the finer organic matter to hold the moisture, which is why I'm adding the manure. Because I think putting a good solid layer of organic matter, then all these trimmings on top, might help to keep that soil covered a lot better. So just heading down, this is my first elderberry that did quite well. Just more chop and drop we're needing to do right through here. I've just made a start on this area the other day. I've got my olive trees that I haven't tended to yet, and I've started on one of the hazelnuts, but I've still got to do that hazelnut there. As you can see, I've got a lot of planting to do. That's one of the strategies that I'm using to get this under control. Lots of planting for shade, planting to provide the biomass, and the biomass to convert the soil into soil that supports my food forest a lot better. And now we're moving into the peach tree guild, where I've got a few more little shrubs. I've been doing quite a bit of work in this area with pruning of my trees, and of course all the thick mulching. That is the peach tree that was very productive this year, so I'm giving it a good chance to be productive again. I did find my rhubarb up here dried out a lot, so I'm going to be making sure to get that organic layer really thickly around these plants to give them a better chance for next summer. So too the black currants that I've got here. I actually did lose one, which I'll be replacing just there because they were just too dry. That brings us to the end of my swale system. This is my apricot tree guild, where I did start to add in additional plantings. I don't know if you can see it there. That's a little rosemary plant. And I've started to add in some comfrey. There's some raspberries over there, but they do need a bit more mulch really for them to take off. Through here, I mean, it does get a little bit more shade, but I have added a lot more of all the mulch in this area. I'm starting with this and trying to convert this area first, but I think it's slowly paying off. That's a little native violet and some comfrey through there. Some more rosemary. The grasses just seem to be getting a little bit more under control in this area with the extra attention. And you can certainly see under that tree there, the grasses really aren't much of an issue at all. I hope you've enjoyed today's tour of my swales and the talk through the strategies I'm using to address the issues I've had and move the system along a little bit quicker. If you've got any comments or questions, please leave them below and consider subscribing if you haven't already. By hitting the notify button, you'll be made aware of when I publish my videos. Thank you so much for watching, and bye for now.